Well, hello and welcome, Marija Newsom. What a pleasure to have you today. Marija Newsom is a nationally and internationally awarded educator. She's been the longest serving director for 35 years at the longest operating heritage school in the United States, Lithuanian-American Heritage School, St. Casimir's. And she's also a former teacher of English and literature at one of the leading Catholic schools in Los Angeles. She's also a mother of 3 adult children. So it's a great pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grigas, and I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on your very successful program. I'd like to congratulate you on your success in your educational endeavors that are very important in this day and age. So thank you.
So today I really wanted to discuss with you the importance of identity and family history and heritage in parenting and educating our children. So that will be the focus. But as someone with such a long history of education, more than 35 years, you've been in leadership for 35 years, you've been teaching for longer. I wanted to ask you, what qualities do you think make students successful and likely to succeed in life and growing up and become a thriving adult?
Okay, well, thank you. That's a very it's a very good question. It's a very deep question because we could start with the question of success. We each have to define success as we see it. Every parent is going to define success differently. Every parent will want a different kind of success for his or her child. Every parent wants a different kind of success for themselves. So are we talking about financial success for your child in the future? Are we talking about spiritual success? Are we talking about self-satisfaction? Are we talking artistic success? So I think when you talk about success, first of all, you as a parent have to say, how do I define success? And what is it that I want for myself as a successful person? And then how do I translate that to my child? Because every form of parenting is educational. So in other words, it's not a question of how do we educate our kids, it's how do we parent? And that's a very broad question with a lot of different elements to it, and success is one of them. And how do we create a successful child? Well, first of all, you should have, or I would think you have a vision of what kind of child you want. Hey, do you see anybody around you that has a family or that has children that you admire? Perhaps they're talented, or perhaps they're very polite, or perhaps they're free spirited. Well, take a look at that and say, is that something that would work in my family? Is that something that would work with the characteristics that my child is exhibiting? And then maybe go from there and think, hey, if I would like to have that type of a child, or to have a child that has those kinds of characteristics or abilities, what does it take to get there? Okay, success is a lot of work. Success is, and I think you go from there. And of course, a child is going to interpret what he or she sees at home in their own way. They may see a very successful parent financially. They may be living in a beautiful home, and yes, that's the definition of success. But maybe they see a lot of stress. They see a lot of strain between parents. They don't see their parents. Okay, they may say, well, I don't want that kind of success. I want a different kind of success. So it comes down to the definition of success.
And your parenting philosophy, you could say.
Philosophy. And your parenting philosophy is a complicated issue. And we can get into that if it's something that we want to continue in this conversation. because I have some thoughts about parenting philosophy
Well,
also.
let's hear it. Let's hear it. Because it really, in many ways, when we think about our parenting our child and our child's education, a lot of it does come down to our parenting philosophy and our own worldviews. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that no matter what your child ends up choosing as a life path, that child needs some fundamentals. Okay, some fundamentals that will serve him or her very well in life. And what are those fundamentals? Well, I call them like fundamental values. And what are those values? Again, it comes from your home. Okay, as an example, generosity of spirit. You want a child that has generosity of spirit. In this world, we need to be concerned about others, not just about our own, our individual. You need a child who has integrity, okay? A child who can stand up for himself, for herself, okay? A child who can speak his or her mind. And that's something when we talk later on maybe about methodology or something, that is so essential because it doesn't help to have something in your heart if you can't express it. Okay. You would like, I would like, or I would recommend focusing on self-discipline. In my mind, self-discipline is the basis of all other values. Because if you can teach a child to have self-regulation, self-control, self-discipline, okay, then all of these other virtues and values will stem from that. And of course, we could, investigate every value and see how the self-discipline. But you start off with that kind of a foundation, and then you build on that, and you see where that takes the child. Because then we're talking about the child's characteristics, his innate abilities, what he's drawn to, and so on. So that's the next step.
You highlighted self-discipline, and it seems like self-discipline is a value that has somewhat fallen out of favor, right? Or it's certainly less popular than it used to be in more traditional times. What have you seen as, again, an educator with so many years of experience, and as well as a parent, when it comes to self-discipline and its waning, perhaps, popularity?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because in the 50s, okay, let's talk about the 50s, because that's when I was a kid. Okay, you would have these little exercises in class where you would say, okay, we're going to put a piece of candy here, but we're not going to eat it. Okay, and that's part of like self-discipline, and that's an exercise in self-control. So there was talk about self-control and self-discipline. Okay, there was this idea of do the hard thing first and then wait to do the easy one later. Like have your vegetables and then your dessert. So, I remember, maybe it was just myself, but I think others too. You'd come home and you would do the hard homework, the difficult lessons first, and then you would leave like the spelling or whatever it was till the end because that was easier. So, all of these little steps build up this self-discipline. And of course, it depends on your family too. Coming from an immigrant background, I come from a family that had to be self-disciplined, that had to worry about, how they used the world around them, because they started off from nothing here in the United States. So that's where self-discipline comes in also. But today, it's a throwaway world. And we see that not only in consumer goods, we see that in our popular culture, we see that in our popular attitudes. Nobody is asked to wait. I could go on Amazon and have something here the next day. So where's the self-discipline in that? And this is something, that you can foster in your family if you have that, if you see that as a value. And there are different ways that you could do it at home. And I think parents do it, telling your child to go and do your chores, or you can't, go play your video game until this and this is done. So some of that is also teaching self-discipline.
What about the values and the skills that you think parents should instill at home for a child to do well in school, to be successful academically?
Once again, I go back to the parents, and I would ask the parent, what is it that you would like to see your child achieve academically? Now, we all assume that parents want their children to be stellar, to be wonderful, to get all A's. And not all parents want that, because maybe they had a very strict educational experience and they really don't want that for their child. Okay. Then there are those who insist on it. And even if they got an A minus, that's not good enough. You have to go there and you have to, achieve that A. So how do you help a child? Well, first you have to know your child. You have to recognize, what kind of child do you have? Do you have a silent child? Do you have a thinker? Do you have somebody who really needs a lot of kinetic movement in his or her life? Do you have somebody who expresses themselves, creatively? Okay, and here I am talking about the various forms of intelligence. Okay, this is not, this is sort of a known theory. Do you have a verbal child, somebody who can speak very easily and express themselves? And I would say that once you have identified that in your child, okay, then you kind of focus on that ability, and then you try to motivate them through that particular characteristic of their personalities. Okay? And there may be a child who is not interested in academics. Okay? Not interested, but then again, you would like to have these fundamental skills in place. So then you have to revert to the parenting part. And then if you want, the reward and punishment, or, whatever it takes based on that child's age. Also, whatever it takes to get them to work on their homework or to work on their project, to instill a sense of pride. Look what you have achieved. Okay, and look how well you have done this or that or the other thing. And of course, this comes down to the teacher also. So the teacher in class has to recognize those same abilities that the parent recognizes at home. And I have an example. I was the kind of teacher who always infused all my academics with creative work. That went hand in hand with with the academics, with the straight teaching. And most kids loved it because they were able to do something other than, just regurgitate the facts. And here I am feeling very good about that, and, plastering the walls in class with all of this wonderful work, masks from mythological gods and all the other things. And one child says, oh no, I have to do another art project. So clearly for that child, that was not an impetus. And he was not interested in doing it. So he did the minimum. But on the other hand, when it came to giving an oral report, he did a very good job because he was more verbal than that. So you have to recognize these elements in your child and not foist your own desires. You see, you could have a parent who's like highly academic and they don't have an academic child. You're going to cause a lot of stress in life. You're going to cause a lot of stress for your child. And I call it the Cinderella stepsister syndrome. So remember that story. Cinderella's stepsisters tried everything they could to stick their big feet into that glass slipper. And it didn't work. It only worked on Cinderella. So, parents have to be careful about that. Don't try to fit a foot into a shoe that doesn't fit.
Yes. Yes,
So these are
absolutely.
kind of
Well, you
anecdotal.
focused a lot of your career on heritage and family history and family values. To what extent do you think this sense of self identity and knowing your family history, knowing your heritage is an important part of education in terms of raising your child, in terms of raising a confident and successful young adult?
Yeah. Well, I think fortunately in the century that we're living in, there is much more attention and respect being paid to ethnic identity. Uh, we can just see that. Let's talk about the United States, okay? So we see all of those cultural movements in the United States. We see a variety of exhibition of ethnic pride wherever it may be, racial pride, and that's wonderful because deep down inside, everybody has something that's unique that they would like to have acknowledged. Now, in the 50s, okay, in the 50s, you had that social theory of the melting pot, right? America had to be the melting pot. You came to the United States, you left your ethnic identity in Ellis Island or wherever you left it, and then you became an American. And as I said before, just taking a look at my name, okay? So I come into kindergarten and my name is Marija Bernadetta Sandanavičius. 13 letters in my last name. Okay. Very nice Christian names, Marija Bernadetta Sandanavičius. I come into kindergarten and, everybody has to put their name on a little name tag, or the teachers wrote it for you. Well, that name is not going to fit there. So what do the teachers say? Well, from now on, your name is going to be Mary Sanda. And that Mary Sanda. And that's where we got the Mary from. And, and of course, on all of my documents and everything else, it'll say Maria because that's my official name. And they even took to calling my parents Mr. and Mrs. Sanda. I mean, not that this was, officially changed, but it was this attitude of let's make it easy for the Americans. Let's do that. Or even if those of us who go to a nail salon, right? All these wonderful, Asian women have these beautiful, names, but they all change them to Jennifer and Karen and, and very American sounding names because they don't trust Americans to pronounce their names correctly, probably. But it was this theory of the melting pot in the 50s. And slowly, I mean, I think society saw that, you can't tap down a person's passionate attachment to their identity. After all, we're not mushrooms. We didn't just spring up after the last rain. We all come from somewhere, all of us. And identifying that or even thinking about it will enrich your life. I mean, so that's my fundamental take on
When
ethnic
when
identity.
you're parenting a young child, why do you think that is so important, instilling that self identity and their culture in the child?
Okay, because I think all of us want a child to feel that he or she is unique, and your ethnic identity adds to your uniqueness. And you may come from a very popular ethnic background. You may be French, you may be Italian, you may be Chinese. These are huge ethnic groups. Okay, but that's what makes you unique, makes you who you are. You came from a long line of someone, and it ended up in you. And look at you, and you're wonderful. There's nobody else like you, but you came from a very special place. Uh, in the United States, I mean, look at the proliferation of all of these, DNA searches and genealogy searches and all the rest. People are getting very interested in learning more about their background. Um, and I think in the United States, especially so, because we are such a conglomerate of ethnicities. And so I think a child will start to feel special. Hey, this is what I have. This is my connection. And maybe a parent then could find connections in the world around him, whether it's food, whether it's literature, whether it's some kind of a performance. Hey, this is where your people come from. Uh, this is what's in your background. These wonderful, like, Korean dances, or a certain kind of a cuisine, or a certain kind of cultural dress, and so on. And don't don't even get me started about language. All that's a whole other
Well, let us hear
sermon
it.
that
I
I
know foreign
preach.
language is very important to you. It's part of your education history as well. I mean, what you've been teaching at the Heritage School for more than 35 years.
And that was my course of study too as a young woman. I studied German, I studied some Russian, I studied Italian, and of course Lithuanian was always a given. And I just found that with every language, even if you know a little bit of it, you open up a whole other world. You live a little bit of a different life. You speak to somebody in their language, or you say hello in their language, and their eyes light up. The relationship is automatically just a little bit closer. And if you have that gift, that's a natural gift to you, have been given of another language other than English, I'm assuming. How easy is it just to give it to your children? You don't have to spend any money on it. You don't have to do anything. You just relate to your child in that language to the best of your ability. And I would put money on it that your child will be very, very happy, even if they never become proficient in your language. But the fact that they had a start, the fact that there was a seed planted, will be appreciated by them. And somewhere in their lives, that language or their cultural identity will be useful, or will enrich them, whether socially or professionally or academically.
What would you recommend to families who don't have very close ties or don't have much knowledge of their, cultural background, of their heritage? How could they use some tools to enrich their child in early age?
Yeah. I think that even if when they look back uh, into what their grandmother told them, or what their parents or aunts or uncles told them, they'll find a little bit of something. And I find that if they're like what they call the 57 Heinz variety, or whatever that was, right? They'll latch on to one that they like. Oh, yes, of course, I am British, or something else. And I think that's the starting point, and that's the starting point. Talk about it at home. What do you think? Maybe my last name is Smith, let's say, but let's take a look. Where did that Smith come from? My last name, my husband's last name, is Newsom. Okay. But we found that there's a town called Newsoms, Virginia. And in other words, there must have been a settlement of Newsoms over there somewhere in the 17th century or whatever it was. So in other words, you have to look for it. And many American families have created their genealogies. I know that the Mormon religion keeps lots of genealogical records, and you are able to access them for free and to see where that takes you. So that would be my recommendation for those who don't have, like a very specific identifiable ethnicity. On the other hand, I think it's important for parents. Maybe you don't have like an ethnic tradition to follow during Christmas, your birthday, or whatever it is. Start your own traditions. They don't have to be ethnic, but that also gives a child a foundation. And I read something that I want to share with you, but to me it was rather sad. But then my daughter put kind of a positive twist on it. I was reading about what people do for Christmas Eve. Okay, so we know that Lithuanians have this wonderful Christmas Eve dinner with 12 foods with a lot of significance and traditions and different kinds of fortune telling and wonderful things that go on. And then I was reading about others. So some people, they'll go to the movies. Somebody else will, have a takeout Chinese, or they'll have, whatever, tamales, or they have different traditions. And I read about one that said, well, on Christmas Eve, we order pizza, and then we leave it in the box and put it in the oven. And then we go to Mass, and we come back, we eat the pizza, and we watch a Christmas show on television. And coming from a very rich tradition, I thought, God, that's sad. You have pizza in a box that you heat up then and when you come back. And I was relating that to my daughter, and she said, but wait a minute, but that's their tradition. And that's what they look forward to for Christmas Eve. So, Mom, don't knock it, you know. And really, and that made me think that families establish their own foundational behaviors, whether it's in values, traditions, attitudes, definitions of success, or whatever it is. That's the most important. And then everybody else influences you from there on in.
You touched that not everything has to be related to your maybe ethnic background or, national background or so on. What other ways could you instill a sense of self in a child, maybe, through religion, certain family values? What are some other ways a child can really have a very strong sense of self and their family?
Well, I guess I touched upon the heritage or the ethnicity sort of very superficially. But of course, the deeper you go into your ethnic identity, the more hopefully you will want to be identified with it and learn more about it. There are classes you can take. There are schools that you can attend. A lot of ethnic groups have weekend classes. The Lithuanians definitely have. The Lithuanian Heritage School that in Los Angeles has been functioning for 72 years. So in other words, even a small nation like Lithuania that has a very broad diaspora population, very, very important to maintain that heritage. Other values, well, again, I think it's going to come down to your family. I am a proponent of organized religion. Okay, I think organized religion, honoring organized religion, practicing it to however it is that you want to approach it, I think that also gives a child a heads up in life, something that they could go back on when life becomes too difficult. As a child, they may not have that many difficulties, but they'll see later on. You need something there to help you out. You need something there. And the statement that I don't buy, so to speak, from parents is when they say, well, we're not raising our child in a particular religion. When they're older, they will decide. That's probably like 0.5% of the population. Okay. Children don't decide. they'll throw away if they've been raised with something and it doesn't work for them, they'll discard it. But very few will go and search for another organized system to help them in their lives. They may join social justice movements, okay, all of this wokeness that we have these days, right? Those are social justice movements, and that's wonderful, okay, and that's fine, but that's a movement. And I hope this attention to social justice in the United States has a lasting effect. And I hope it's not just a passing cultural movement. Okay. But if you have a fundamental spiritual tradition to which you are attached, you're not going to worry about cultural trends. That's your tradition, to be just, to be loving, to be forgiving, or whatever other tenets you hold on to. So okay. So back to what you were saying. So spirituality or organized religion, that's important. Also a proponent of education. Okay, if you don't make it academically, well then learn a skill. A parent has to also identify in his child if this is not an academician in the making. Okay, well, he may be a fabulous plumber. She may be a wonderful, something else. And that's good too. You have to recognize in which direction your child is leaning. And of course, I guess the parent's greatest fear is that the child doesn't lean towards anything and that, they kind of along in life and they're 45 and they're still drifting and trying to find themselves and so on. So you got to be pretty practical. Okay, you keep drifting, but learn how to type or learn how to do something so that you're not out in the streets. Pretty fundamental.
To what
pretty
extent do you think
concrete.
an extended family circle, so close relations with extended family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, are important? Because when it comes to, again, family traditions, family values, and parenting, it seems this would be a very fundamental part. But at the same time, in our current lifestyle and our modern world, not a lot of families have access to that, right? A lot of them are spread out across the United States. What would be your advice with families that have access to it or some that don't, to their extended family?
Well, I think your question also has an answer in it. That there's a wonderful value to extended families, not just in a practical sense. You could always have babysitters there, right? Or you can always be assured that somebody is going to come for dinner and so on. I mean, the reverse is true also. You might not want to see, that particular cousin or that particular uncle, and you're forced to see them a couple of times a year and so on. But for the most part, extended families are wonderful. It's wonderful. They add to your sense of who you are, that you're not that mushroom that sprouted up, that there are others, and maybe they came from that same tree, but life or their personalities have taken them in different directions. And sometimes, you will love that cousin who other people might think is weird, or that uncle or that aunt or whatever. But it's your uncle, it's your cousin. It's part of your identity, part of your family. How do you keep in touch with them? Again, America has always promoted this idea of mobility. So that's why everybody goes away to college. Everybody grows up and moves away.
Florida.
Grandparents go and move into senior house, or whatever it is. And that's sort of a cultural thing too. I don't know if that happens in Europe, but definitely America promotes that very much. Retirement communities and all of that. Deny that exists. Okay, it exists, and we are all spread apart, as you said. Well, you have FaceTime, you have, travel opportunities. Unfortunately, kids don't write letters anymore, but letter writing would be a wonderful skill to to resurrect, or to go on FaceTime and tape, record your parents, your grandparents, or even the young people who are away at college, record their responses, record their reactions. What's going on? Ask them things. Who are your friends? What's the hardest class that you're taking, or whatever it is? And all of this is doable. All of this is connection. And because we have technology available, that would be an easy thing to do. But you have to put effort into it. They're not going to sudden. Parents have to come up with these ideas. Parents have to start the project going, and hopefully, the child will get some satisfaction from it. And remind them ahead of time. They're not always going to find all those wonderful relatives that they think are out there. There might be some who don't want to have anything to do with you, and that's okay too, because that's your family, and that's the branch that maybe wants to be on its own.
You have said a couple of things that have really struck me, and I wanted to read them, and you can maybe elaborate. In one interview, you had written, "It is important to know where you come from, because it grounds you and gives you a starting point for the rest of your life. You are like a house with a solid foundation, as opposed to one that is built on sand." So this is really the theme of our talk today, and I wanted to see if you wanted to add more to it.
Well, when I moved to California, or to Los Angeles, specifically from New York, I was surprised that the homes here don't have basements. Okay, they don't have basements. In New York, every house has a basement. I marveled at that. And I said, wait a minute, how could you have a house without a basement? And of course, then I found out from my architect husband what the reason is why there are no basements, because you don't have a frost line here. You don't need a basement, and so on. But to me, it became an allegory for people, right? There are people who don't have basements in their lives. Their lives are like that house built just, on the ground, maybe on a very, very shallow foundation. And I don't know, I always thought having a basement made your house sturdier, okay? And having a sense of who you are, having a sense of where you come from, having a sense of family around you, whether they're there realistically and, around you physically or in your environment, or whether in your mind somewhere, okay? Well, I would think that, to me, that gives me great comfort to know that I am a significant individual in this world. And I'll take it from there. I'm a significant individual, and I will try my best to leave my mark on the world somehow. Doesn't have to be a big mark, but I will leave it somehow. Because I'm not just, a wisp in the wind. And I think a child needs to know that. But again, you need to have a certain balance in the way you relate these things to a child. You don't want them to be overly, individualistic, like I'm great, but you're not. This whole idea that we all have a certain uniqueness to us, we all have a certain greatness to us, and let's learn from it and enjoy it. And the same with academics. You don't want to overburden your child with just the academics in his or her life, or to fill every single moment of their lives with an activity. Again, from one of my experiences in teaching junior high, one boy wrote about, he was a sixth grader, I think, and he just wrote a little essay about how he enjoys lying down under a tree with his hands behind his head and just dreaming about things and thinking about things. And I thought, God bless you, that you are able to do that and to consciously do it and to consciously enjoy it. How many of our kids can say the same thing now? Because we're always saying it's much better to be active, always You need that lesson and the other one, and then you have to keep doing this. And that's why children and young people are having a hard time coping. So that element of balance is important. Again, back to the parents. I think it
Well,
comes
one thing
back
that
to the
struck
parents.
me that you said is that if you have the sense of roots and this basement, this makes you want to leave a mark as well, because of knowing the significance of where you come from makes you want to leave as well your mark on the world. So I think that's a very important thought. And also now you touched on balance, and I have another quote for you, which I found quite funny. And I'm wondering how you found that balance yourself then. So my children claim that I have told them that God expects them to do their best, but that I expect a little more. I could have possibly said that, maybe. So how did you clearly had very high expectations and your children knew it, greater than the expectations of God. So how did you find that balance in your parenting?
First of all, Dr. Grigas, thank you for reading it the way you did, because I think that's exactly how I meant it with that intonation. So that was correct. In thinking about that statement, I have to chuckle to myself because I think I didn't mean it in a theological sense. I think they were using it as an excuse at that given time that, hey, Mom, I already did my best. And, you've always told us just God wants you to do your best. And we did. And I suspect that at the time that I said that, I think they were using God as an excuse. I'm thinking back, I think that must have been the case. Because, you don't go into some theological discussion with a child. So I suspect that I wasn't saying you have to be overachievers, okay? Because I really never said that to them. They learned their achievement in their own way. But I think that's the genesis of that quote. That I expect you to do what you humanly can do that's better than what you did. And maybe God is a little more forgiving than I am. But yeah. So I
Wonderful.
think that's where
Well,
that
I'm
comes
wondering
from.
if you have any last advice for our parents. Our audience is really parents of younger children still in elementary school and middle school. What advice would you give them in those early years?
Well, one question that we did not touch upon, and I think is essential, is that you can also succeed by failing. What does failure? What role does failure play in your life? Okay, so now we've talked about the fundamentals, this basement of your life, right? So you have that. Then you have all of these other things that are happening, social influences, school influences, other family influences, and so on. As soon as your child goes to school, even as soon as your child starts connecting with, you start connecting with another family, you have all of these influences right away. And in some cases, everything's going to work just fine, and your child will be on the road to what you think is success. And then failure hits. Your child isn't the poster child. He's not, or she's not, the star pupil or the star athlete. And failure sets in. Okay, so what does a parent do immediately? You want to protect that child. You want to protect that child from consequences, right? You do. And that's normal, and that's fine. But don't go overboard with it. Don't go overboard with that protection. Well, I'm just going to call Johnny's mother and read her the riot act because, this, the other thing. Well, that's absolutely wrong, because you're putting your child in greater social jeopardy then by getting involved in those tiffs. Failure, and again, I'm going to give another anecdote, okay, as an example. There was a young middle school aged young man in their school. They were choosing teams for the school teams, right? So they had tryouts. And of course, whatever it was, I think baseball or basketball or whatever it was. Let's say it was baseball. I don't know. And everybody makes it except for him. Okay, so totally dejected. Horrible, horrible feeling. Comes home, parents, especially the mother, is very protective. How could this be? This is ridiculous. They pick 5 and they don't pick you, and so on. However, to that boy, that experience was the starting point of an outstanding career, of an outstanding physical prowess career, and then a professional career. So in other words, for him, the failure served as I will show you moment that I will be better than all of you in this field, let's say. And it worked. So if you could channel that failure into another path, sometimes the child does it himself, sometimes or herself. They see something that they don't like around them, whether it's in their family or in this case, failed at something. Okay, they stand up, dust themselves off, and say, okay, I'm going to move ahead. And that's where the parental basement comes in, because then they have that resilience. We want a child to be resilient also, not to be, this wilting flower that at the first sign of failure, you're gone. And it's the same with parents helping their kids with homework. When they overdo it, and in some cases, they'll even have their secretaries, the fathers will have the secretaries type up something, for a paper or something, even in middle school. I'm not even talking about high school. Okay, the teachers can see that, but what message are you giving your child? You're telling your child, I don't trust your ability. Let me fix it up for you. Okay, you're not helping the child. You're making him feel worse about himself. So anyway, these are kind of the parting thoughts that I would have about, as I said, the fundamental values, the importance of parenting, the importance of heritage as part of your identity, the importance and the definition of success, and of course, failure is also part of it. But the one sentence that I will probably leave with all of you is that you have to love your children unconditionally. Just love your children unconditionally. Watch them, see where they're going, see where their talents and their characters are leading them. Work with that particular characteristic of theirs, and love them. Especially in middle school, keep a good eye on them, because there's a lot of, there are a lot of mental health issues that arise in middle school. Have an open forum at home. We didn't, in our discussion here, we didn't talk about, how do you deal with the different kinds of attitudes that the world is suggesting to you, or that the school is suggesting to you. Well, dialogue, open dialogue. Teach your children to express their thoughts. Take a concept that maybe is being taught at school that you don't agree with as a parent, maybe. Deconstruct it. Take it apart with your child and say, okay, this is what they're saying. Now, is this really the way it is? And so this will teach the child to analyze whatever it is that they're hearing out there, or whatever they're reading in the paper, on the internet, or whatever. You want to teach them this critical thought process and verbal expression. And, I'm sorry, as I said, I could
well, you've
go
given
on
us
forever.
so much. And you've really highlighted first, we should love our child and know our child so we can know their strengths and weaknesses. You really emphasize discipline, a value that's fading away. Also, the value of resilience. Then having that solid foundation, having that basement as well, something that you can really turn to later in life or grow your self-confidence and self-identity from. So it's really those family values, family history, family identity. And, again, the importance of values, religious values, I know are very important to you. And critical thinking and reasoning and the ability to express yourself. So I think that's a good list for any parent already to get started with. Thank you so much, Marija Newsom, for joining us today. This has been such a pleasure to hear your years of experience and insights. And we hope to see you next time.
And thank you, Dr. Grigas, and wishing you lots of success with your educational program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos.